Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? It is February 5th, Tuesday, February 5th, 2019. My fellow Americans, distinguished guests, not that distinguished guests who danced in videos when they were in college and are now in Congress. I don't know, single-payer promoting guests, the rest of you. It's State of the Union Day here at Kagro in the Morning, which is to say, I don't know, there you go. State of the Union will be delivered later tonight. I won't watch it. You won't watch it. You might watch it. I won't. I might not even watch Twitter watching it. I'm not really sure how it's going to go down tonight. But we'll stand by for digestion of it tomorrow with Greg Dworkin and Joan McCarter. That's the best way to handle the thing, I think. As usual, I won't be watching. As it turns out, there's a compilation of reasons why you don't have to watch. 3 reasons that the State of the Union speeches don't matter. Published by 538. Let's see, it's not, what's his name himself that has done it. He has farmed this one out to 3 others. 3 people, I guess each one brought a reason that the State of the Union speech doesn't matter. I don't know. Nathaniel Rakich, Jeffrey Skelly, and Julia Azari. Should you read an article about why something else doesn't matter? Maybe. We might spend some time on it. But it's true, the speech never matters. It has never interested me as a political junkie, and I guess really more as a process junkie. It's never interested me. Speeches really generally don't. Stump speeches during campaign, convention speeches, I watch for the fact that it's a thing that people watch, and I'm interested in how they react to it, because that's what we'll really be talking about. But laying out your program for the coming year is rarely very interesting to me with an effective president who knows what he's talking about. This one, of course, you're just watching for the laughs, if any reason at all. They never do anything. They don't even really usually lay out anything clear with respect to an agenda. So, I mean, they propose an agenda. It's just not what ends up happening, typically speaking. And anything that does end up happening develops so slowly that, 1, you will likely have heard about the theme before it is actually expounded in the State of the Union address, and then 2, you'll hear about it for 6 months to a year before they actually work out legislation on it, and then 3, they'll amend the legislation to death and maybe even not pass it at the end anyhow. So, to me, anything that's worth extracting from a State of the Union speech will be extracted for you over the course of many months, and you can spend your time better elsewhere. That's not to say that watching people tweet about it is a better use of your time. It might be more. It's more entertaining for me, and maybe for some other people too, than watching the actual address. But I never recommend it. But it is a part of our political culture, and I can't say you're not allowed to do it, just as I can't truly say you're not allowed to respond to the State of the Union address. A little bit of a controversy brewing around that for the past couple of days, really. The official response on the part of Democrats in Washington is being delivered by a Democrat who's not in Washington, although I don't know whether she's coming to Washington to do this thing or what. Stacey Abrams, who recently ran for, what did she run for? She was governor, right? And, yeah, well, she's got a specific message to deliver, and I think is a very good messenger to carry this for a number of reasons, not the least of which is she's actually quite a good speaker, which is probably an important thing when you are trying to select who's going to give the official response. The controversy, such as it is swirling around it, Bernie Sanders is also going to deliver his own response. And that's all it is. It's his own response. And people are arguing with a Republican dude out there who's pointing out, hey, all members of Congress respond. They give their own response to the State of the Union. They usually put it out as a press release, though sometimes they do tape videos and send those to the people who are interested, which in the case of most members of Congress is the local media for their constituency. In the case of Bernie Sanders, it might in fact be wider than that. And he's simply, I mean, if you look at it this way, he's simply disseminating his response via the internet, which is an easier and more reliable way of distributing it, and the people who want it can get it. But yeah, it does come with a little additional meaning. Democrats are supposed to, of course, unite behind this one response, and he's not doing that. But then, of course, we're reminded, well, he's not a Democrat. And, look, I don't really care that much. I don't think it really even promotes any sort of serious question about disunity. He's not a Democrat, then it can't. You can't write Dems in disarray if the guy's not a Democrat, but that won't stop anybody from writing it anyway. And like the guy said, I mean, people are yelling at him because he's Republican. I forget who the guy was. But yeah, lots of people actually even videotape responses or will disseminate it by the internet. And it doesn't really matter a great deal. Not to me. If you want to let it bother you, because that's a better use of your time than watching the actual State of the Union address, that is okay too. I'm not particularly concerned about it. And I'm not going to be listening to that response either. Not his, not anybody's. I never did, and likely never will, unless I write one of them, in which case I will probably complain about watching it because lines will get changed, and I'll say, I wasn't going to say it that way, but he changed it, or he made me change it, or whatever. Anyway, I'll share the article with you from 538. Should we read it? I'm just sort of curious. Now that I think about it, now that I've expounded on it for 25 minutes, we can go ahead. Oh, but before I do, I have to take this. This is how these things happen to me in life. Yesterday, I went back and forth. I obsessed over this for a good, I don't know, several expanses of 5 to 15 minutes distributed over the past couple of days. The issue was yesterday was my brother's birthday, and I always obsess over these things. Do I just shout out their name and say, happy birthday, person, or do I get very concerned about security, as I often do? You never know. There's weirdos out there, and I don't want to identify by name any of the people, who are in my family, but who might be somehow targeted because some loon somewhere got mad about something I said on the internet and began combing through every single podcast looking for hints as to where he could find members of my family. I don't know. I told you I obsess about these things for far too long. So happy birthday, brother. And so yesterday was the birthday, and I obsessed about how to deal with it for so long that I came to no conclusion. And then of course I started off on the news, and that was that. And I never got back to it. And I'm sad about that because, of course, this is one of the few people who's actually listening that I might wish happy birthday to, who's actually hearing it, and then he didn't hear it, and now he's worried. Oh my God! Now he's not saying my name. What's going on here? I worry about these things. Typically, I won't do it for my kids. I won't say their names on here because that's the sort of thing that there could be real weirdos and danger. Here, I don't think so, but okay. You know who you are, and others who might be listening, whose birthday it isn't, might also know who you are. And I don't know, that sounds overly dramatic. Okay, but happy birthday. I hope it was good. It was yesterday, so I hope this day is more entertaining, let's say, now that you've heard this whole story. All right. What are the reasons why the State of the Union doesn't matter? Is this really a good topic? Here's something that doesn't matter, and here are 3 reasons why it doesn't matter. I don't know. I'm anxious to find out whether data people think it doesn't matter for a reason that would matter to me. Let's see. The header here, or the opening paragraph, it took a while, but President Trump's second State of the Union address is finally here. And remember, yes, it's the second State of the Union address because in 2017... for every president who gets sworn in, who's new to the job. There's a State of the Union-ish address given each year, and they don't yet have any idea what the State of the Union is. And in Trump's case, that might be literally true. And so they are just invited to give a address to a joint session of Congress that looks like a State of the Union, because everyone likes what the State of the Union looks like. It's not just Trump who values that opportunity. Every other president who's done the same thing, and I've come here to talk to you about the State of the Union. I just don't know what it is yet. Do any of them give up television time? No. So he's not unique in that. It took a while, but President Trump's second State of the Union address is finally here. From one perspective, the fact that it's happening is more important than the speech itself. It was nearly the casualty of a fight between Trump and House Democrats over funding a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. Tensions remain high as Congress and the president work toward the February 15th deadline to avert another government shutdown. Once he gets his speech, we may in fact see that shutdown. Trump's address starts at 9 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, and we'll be live blogging our thoughts in real time at 5:38. It clearly matters to them. First, though, let's talk a little bit about how the State of the Union addresses work and what you can expect this evening. Okay, interesting. I guess their view of why it doesn't matter. First, the speeches don't affect approval ratings much. And they have charts to show you this. Going back to, I guess this is by percentage of change. And, of course, it starts out right away with a rather large change, a 10% swing in the polls from 59% approval to 69% approval for Bill Clinton in 1998. Though that was a hell of a year. In 1996, also a hell of a year, a 6-point swing. So topping the list, Clinton, who really could do things with a speech that other people couldn't do. And look, 10-point swing, 6-point swing, tied for second with another 6-point swing, George W. Bush, 2005 speech, swinging from 51% approval to 57% approval. And let me just sort of thumb through here. Let's see. Are there higher rates of approval of late heading into a speech than Clinton enjoyed in 1998, 59%? You would think someone could beat Clinton 96 through 98 somehow. 59% approval going in. 60% going in for George W. Bush, 2003. That's prior to finding out that he was wiretapping everybody. But Clinton's got him beat in 1999, 69% going into the speech. But guess what? He was, and everybody say nice and then laugh about it because it's Clinton. 69% going into the speech. What do you think his percentage was coming out of the speech? You like it. It's nice. It's 69. That's a 0 swing. So, okay. Well, but there wasn't much room to go up from 69%. However, let's see. George H.W. Bush looks to have, wait a minute. He's topped again. The Bushes have cornered the market. Wow. Fantastic. Okay. 83, 84. The top ratings going in belong to George W. Bush 2002. So we're talking about his first post 9/11 State of the Union address. Goes in at 84% approval. That's where we were post 9/11. But he came out of it with an 82% approval. That's a 2% drop. It's just not that much. The biggest drop, by the way, belonged to his dad, George H.W. Bush, who dropped 7 points after his 1990 State of the Union address, from 80% approval to 73% approval. The lowest going in, just out of curiosity, 34 here for W. I think that's it. So he's got the highest and the lowest going in. 2008, I guess his last go around. The 2008 State of the Union address went in with a 34, went out with a 34. Was that the one where we were supposed to go to Mars, or is that earlier? So anyway, the biggest change ever, 10 points. in the positive direction. The biggest loss ever, 7 points. The average change, 0.2%, 0.2 points. Median change, 0. Average absolute change, 2.5 points. Median absolute change, 2 points. And it's based on Gallup polling. So, I don't know. There you go. So, I guess the point of this one is speeches don't affect approval ratings much. That's what matters to 538. And so, therefore, a good reason to think that the speeches as a whole don't matter much. I won't read you all the verbiage for that. I think the chart tells you everything you need to know. Number 2, speeches don't influence legislation. That's why I don't like them. Presidents use State of the Union addresses to lay out their policy priorities and persuade Congress to pass them, but they're typically successful at only the first of those objectives. That is to say, laying out their policy priorities, not the first one that they say passes. That would be interesting. I wonder if that's really would actually be true. Is the most likely policy priority to pass the one that appears first on the ballot, essentially? I don't know. That doesn't really matter much, but it would be interesting to study scientifically, and that would help you structure your speech, maybe. But we're not doing that here. Let's see. According to political scientists Donna Hoffman and Allison Howard, the average State of the Union from 1965 to 2015, plus those pesky joint addresses to Congress, footnote, explaining what those are all about, like we said at the beginning of this thing, contained 34 policy proposals. That's it? But the share of those proposals that became law within a year of being included in the address varied. On average, Hoffman and Howard found that only about 25% of the president's ideas were fully enacted within a year. I don't know why the year cap on it, but I guess just to keep things, manageable. But I would, you could give them 2 years. Let's see. The number of requests is then charted here, with the highest number of requests belonging to Clinton by far, and also the second place number of requests belonging to Clinton. By the way, apparently also the third place number of requests belonging to Clinton, and that's pretty amazing. The numbers being in the first case over 80, the other one well over 60 and almost all the way to 80, and third place one well over 50 on the way to 60. So I don't know whether that means anything, but it's interesting. Congressional calls to action have an uneven track record is the next chart, showing, I guess, again, the number of requests fulfilled. And there are several who have a tremendous number going on. The share of legislative requests in each State of the Union address or initial address to a joint session of Congress that are totally fulfilled within 1 year. And not personally speaking, like, boy, I'm totally fulfilled this year. I've fulfilled my New Year's resolution to meditate more often. These things that got enacted. Johnson tops the list. There you go. So, and he with well over 60, way back in the 60s. What year was his address? So what are they talking about? I don't know. It doesn't say. The labels on the chart don't make each individual year all that clear, but okay. Second, it looks like it's just been declining since forever. Johnson, then Nixon. Then the next highest is actually Clinton by a smidge over Reagan, then Obama, then a second Reagan, but it's basically a downward, pretty straightforward downward slope on average. All right. It's particularly difficult for a president to get his agenda passed when his party doesn't control Congress, they point out, of course. For example, 33% of the proposals in Barack Obama's 2009 speech and 49% of those in his 2010 speech were fully implemented by the Democrat-controlled 111th Congress, but Obama's success rate dropped when control of Congress was split between Democrats and Republicans from 2011 through 2014. On average, 14% of Obama's proposals in his speech in those 4 years were fully implemented within a year. That doesn't bode well for Trump's proposals. 1 month into the 116th Congress, Trump and House Democrats already have an extremely adversarial relationship. So that's true. Worth pointing out also, Trump doesn't have very many ideas, and of those he has, very few of them are good, and of those, only a certain percentage are considered good even by Republicans. Let's see, number 3 here, presidents end up speaking to their own party. That is true. Although the audience for the State of the Union is theoretically all Americans, viewership of the event is decidedly partisan gleam. For both of Trump's previous addresses to Congress, more self-identified Republicans and Democrats watched, according to polls that were conducted after the speeches, and we can probably expect more of the same in 2019. People from the president's party usually have been more interested in hearing what he has to say since at least the end of the George H.W. Bush administration. There's another chart showing who watches, and basically it says exactly that. When Clinton was president, more Democrats watched than Republicans. Republican viewership declined. Democratic viewership, did it increase? No, I guess it didn't even really decline or decrease, but it shows exactly what you would think. An intertwining set of lines that for Republicans goes down when a Democrat is in office, and then up above Democratic viewership when Republicans are in office, and the opposite pertains for Democrats. While it's unlikely this trend will change tonight, after all, Trump is the most polarizing president on record, voters of all stripes may want to hear what the president has to say in the aftermath of the longest government shutdown in history, and as the standoff over the border wall funding continues. Others may have been drawn in by the dispute over whether the State of the Union would take place. Now, there's more. There's supposed to be 3 reasons why it doesn't matter. There's a 4th entry about something. Let's find out what it is. But the speeches are a part of an important democratic tradition. Oh, like kind of what I said at the beginning. It's a thing. It happens. People watch them, and that's it. But it does remind us, televised primetime addresses date only to the 1960s. So not like it's, a long-time grand tradition or anything. And if you block the speech from happening, life goes on. All right. So let's see. What else have we to figure out here? I don't know. Okay. Athena 5000 has sent me a GIF of who is that? I forget. Seth Meyers saying this could not be less important. The State of the Union is the hashtag here, and so I suppose that we've had enough of that, and it certainly isn't all that important. All right, let's see. Although I had to do it because in his morning tweet for us, Bill let us know, and I forgot to retweet it, but there it goes now, the Daily Coast Radio now being live, that I was going to preview the content of tonight's State of the Union address by just making stuff up, that's not the word he used, and declaring a national emergency. Now, I have not yet declared a national emergency, but I think it does feel like it's time, mostly because this segment has been going on too long. But, I felt like it's a topic, and I wanted to talk about how important it was to me to tell you how unimportant the speech is and ought to be to you too. Let's see. One more thing, or I guess the game now surrounding the State of the Union is who do you invite to be your guest at the State of the Union? And everyone tries to send a message with things like that. And no different this year. Trump himself apparently inviting a kid by the name of Joshua Trump, who is allegedly of no relation to him. He's invited to the speech because apparently kids in his school have been bullying him because of his last name. Which, kids, let's not do that. But I don't know. That doesn't evoke. It evokes sympathy for the kid, of course, which I guess is supposed to be the idea. Although somebody was saying last night, like, boy, Donald Trump can make anything be about himself, right? Is the issue is that there's a kid somewhere getting bullied, and Trump wants you to know that kid is getting bullied because of me, which is like, I don't know. That doesn't really seem like the sort of thing that you would want to call attention to, But I guess he feels bad about it, so he's going to bring the kid in. And, like I said, there's a weirdness to that. And here we have a list of the reasons why it's weird from the Twitter personality known as Oh No She Twitn't. I've never really liked that name, to be honest. I feel like it's trying too hard. But she's a very funny person. And she probably cringes at and regrets the name every once in a while herself. But she notes quite correctly, the guy who came up with Crazy Joe Biden, Crying Chuck Schumer, Crooked Hillary, Cheating Obama, Pocahontas, Horseface, Slimeball, Jim Comey, Little Adam, not Schiff, but ending with 2 T's instead, Low IQ, Maxine Waters, MS-13 lover Nancy Pelosi. That guy feels bad that a kid got bullied because his last name is Trump. Yeah, it's a kind of a good point. I don't know that we really care that much about what Donald Trump thinks about what's going on with poor Josh Trump. But I'm sorry this is happening to you, kid, and I promise not to bully you because of your name. And if you would like, I can hook you up with Dr. Gay Hitler, the dentist from Ohio, and his family, and you guys can sit together. Yeah, I think he's dead, but you get the idea. And things could be worse. Not only could you be a dentist, you could live in Ohio, and yes, and also your name could be Gay Hitler. And okay, Hitler's bad enough. And quite honestly, I think it's just gilding the lily to say you're going to name the kid Gay Hitler, but. How did they know that in a few years that wouldn't be such a tremendous burden? I don't know. So, okay, don't name your kids transgender Hitler, I guess. Probably is a good lesson for anybody at any time. We'll take it from there and be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I believe we wasted enough time on that thing that's going to waste the rest of your time the rest of the day. We can move on to other subjects, things to catch up on, things to follow up on. Let's see. Yesterday, where did this go? Yesterday, we talked a little bit about the leak of Trump's schedules, and that occupied a lot of Republican time yesterday. They're very upset. And there were some more follow-up stories about what it means that a member of the White House would leak such information. The only possibility that such a leaker could have in mind would be to embarrass the president. And that had Maggie Haberman's attention all day. And it's a good storyline. It's not a hugely important storyline in the grand scheme of things. Normally it would be. But this president is a widely acknowledged international disaster, and a nuclear-armed disaster at that. And it might be a wise thing to let everybody know how disinterested he is. I'm not certain whether it could ever do any real good absent the will to impeach him. But, maybe I don't know, somehow it raises an alarm, and people ought to be aware of how disengaged the president is, I think, just generally speaking. So I was glad to have the information, and I can understand why people would be upset about it, but tough noogies. It's real, I guess, and I'm interested in hearing about it. Now, I got an email from a listener who said might be interested in this Twitter feed, which compares Obama's schedules with Trump's schedules. Now, is this something that's been going on for some time, or is this something that just started in reaction to the release of the schedules? The account was established apparently in January of this year, and tweets go back, I don't know how far. How many tweets have they got? 25 tweets. So good. I can figure out exactly how far back they go. January 10th. And I don't know. That's a good question. Like, where did that idea come from if the leak was only just revealed? Is this person the leaker or what? Although these are the public schedules, and I guess these have always been available. And I should say that the Trump public schedule has always been very pointedly blank. They don't like to publicize his schedule, but they don't publicize it because it's embarrassingly blank to begin with. They might also be hiding who he's meeting with almost as a secondary measure. That might have been the original idea, to just hide who he was meeting with to the extent that they could. Which is a pretty good extent, by the way, if you were just not interested in following any of the rules, laws, or norms about these things. But comparing the two, and, well, I could read you some, but what do you want to know? Trump's public schedule for Tuesday, February 5th, has nothing on it except for, of course, 9:10 p.m., the president delivers the State of the Union address at the United States Capitol, which they misspelled, by the way. I guess I have not. Did anybody point that out? No, apparently not. So I guess we can take care of that while we're talking about it. So president's daily schedule, of February 5th, 2019, compared to the day that, I guess, is this not, it doesn't say that it's the date of Obama's State of the Union address, but it's compared to what? I guess another Tuesday. So the dates aren't exactly the same. It's not February 5th versus February 5th, but the day of the week is the same. Is that something that he keeps consistent across all of this? Yeah, I guess so. So he's trying to just show, and that's not I guess that's justifiable, right? Because comparing a Monday and a Saturday, for instance, wouldn't be worth very much. So Tuesday, February 5th, 2019, the president's going to give the State of the Union address. I don't know how much action there really is on a day like that for a good president. They're usually, I imagine, doing lots of work or whatever, but probably running through the speech a couple of times too. Obama's public schedule for Tuesday, February 8th, 2011 is compared here. 10:30 a.m., the president receives a daily intelligence briefing in the Oval Office. Trump, of course, hasn't left the residence yet. 2:30 p.m., the president meets with National Policy Alliance in the Roosevelt Room. That's lunch for Trump. 4:30 p.m., the president and vice president meet with Secretary of Defense Gates in the Oval Office. That's not a lot, though. That's three things, right? So, all right. The point is, it looked like Obama was scheduling more work. And then, of course, there's many days where there's just zero for Trump himself. Yesterday's schedule was intelligence briefing 11:45 versus 10:30 for Obama. And the president has lunch at 12:45. 11:45 is the intelligence briefing. Let's keep it short, guys. I got a 12:45 lunch in the next freaking room. And, there you have it. The president's lunch was on the schedule on February 7th, 2011, though. He was meeting with Paul Volcker in the private dining room. So lunch occasionally making the schedule nonetheless. Very interesting, though. And so, yeah, I don't know who's to blame for this misspelling of capital, though. If the person tweeting these things is reformatting them themselves, it's not a screen capture of anything. So I guess we'll leave well enough alone and not bother pointing out the spelling error. It's not the White House making the spelling error, so it's not funny. Moving on. All right. Let's see. Catch up with a couple of other topics. Any more follow-ups that I need to do? Yeah, let's see. How are we going to deal with this? Which one should be next? All right, well, actually, maybe follow-up time could be done in terms of things we need to pick up that were left unresolved yesterday, and we can head into the new topics. Here's one. The New York Times has this exciting piece from yesterday, just by way of, this is an almost I told you so piece for us here. Trump inaugural committee ordered to hand over documents to federal investigators. We'll see how well they do with that. This is what was occupying Maggie Haberman's time yesterday, along with Ben Protests on this February 4th piece, escalating one of the investigations, one of many, into President Trump's inaugural committee. Federal prosecutors ordered on Monday that its officials turn over documents about donors, finances, and activities, according to two people familiar with the inquiry. The subpoena seeks documents related to all of the committee's donors and guests, any benefits handed out, including tickets and photo opportunities with the president, federal disclosure filings, vendors, contracts, and more, one of the people said. The other of the people familiar with it didn't say any of that, I guess. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. The new requests expand an investigation prosecutors opened late last year amid a flurry of scrutiny of the inaugural committee. Good call. And they showed that the investigations surrounding Mr. Trump, once centered on potential ties to Russia during the 2016 presidential election, have spread far beyond the special counsel's office to include virtually all aspects of his adult life, if you can call it that. His business, his campaign, his inauguration, and his presidency. And that is because he whips them all together in one giant ninja blender and refuses to differentiate between any of the two, any two of the 10. In the subpoena, investigators also showed interest in whether any foreigners illegally donated to the committee, as well as whether committee staff members knew that such donations were illegal, asking for documents laying out legal requirements for donations. Federal law prohibits foreign contributions to federal campaigns, political action committees, and inaugural funds. Prosecutors also requested all documents related to vendors and contractors with the inaugural committee, which raised a record $107 million and spent lavishly. I'd like to see those myself. People familiar with the subpoena said prosecutors are interested in potential money laundering as well as election fraud, though it is possible that prosecutors do not suspect the inaugural committee of such violations. The prosecutors cited those crimes in the subpoena simply as justification for their demand for documents, the people said. Only one individual was named as part of the subpoena's demand for documents, Imad Zuberi, a former fundraiser for President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, who was seeking inroads with Mr. Trump, and whose company, Avenue Ventures, gave $900,000 to the inaugural committee. The subpoena also seeks documents related to his company. A spokesman, Steve Rabinowitz. I know Steve Rabinowitz, I think. I mean, if it's the same Steve Rabinowitz. What are you doing? Said Mr. Zuberi was unaware of having been named in the subpoena, they usually like to tell you, and noted that he gave generously and directly to the inaugural committee, along with many others who donated more. Another entity that the subpoena seeks documents on is Stripe, interesting, which created technology to help process credit card transactions. According to published reports, the company counts Josh Kushner, the brother of Mr. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, among its investors. I did not know that. Josh Kushner is not named in the subpoena, and the spokesman for him declined to comment. I don't know what to make of that. I would say not too much. I mean, Stripe, is the idea here that they selected Stripe as their credit card processor because Jared's brother is an investor? I mean, that could actually be true, but the chances that you would land on Stripe to do credit card processing independent of that is still actually pretty good. They're actually very widely used, particularly when you're talking about orders being placed over the internet. So I wouldn't be too surprised if that went nowhere. But, hey, I'm open to reading an interesting story if you come up with one. A spokesperson for the inaugural committee said it was still reviewing the subpoena and intended to cooperate with the investigation. Just not now. A spokesman for the United States Attorney's Office in Manhattan declined to comment. ABC first reported that a subpoena was in the works, and now we can blather on. That's taken care of. Oh, okay, ABC got the story. But we're the New York Times. Prosecutors have pursued the possibility that the inaugural committee made false statements to the Federal Election Commission. According to people familiar with the matter, it can be a crime to knowingly make false or fraudulent statements to a federal agency. The inaugural committee disclosed a list of donors to the commission, and the prosecutors are examining whether that list is complete and accurate, the person said. If a donor was omitted from the report, prosecutors could take an interest in that as well. The inaugural committee's chairman was Thomas J. Barrack, a close friend of the president's. Mr. Barrack's close aide working on the committee was Rick Gates, the former deputy to Paul Manafort, the former Trump campaign chairman who's been convicted of and pleaded guilty to several crimes in connection with the investigation by the special counsel, who is, by the way, Robert S. Mueller III. Thanks. Mr. Gates has pleaded guilty to financial fraud and lying to the FBI and has been cooperating with Mueller's team for nearly a year. No one who worked for the committee has been accused of wrongdoing, and a subpoena is an initial step in the inquiry. Mr. Barrack and other inaugural committee officials are not named in it. The United States Attorney's Office in Brooklyn separately investigating whether inaugural officials helped foreigners illegally funnel donations to Trump's inaugural committee using so-called straw donors to disguise their donations. People briefed on that inquiry said. As part of their own inquiry, the prosecutors in Manhattan are questioning whether foreign nationals illegally donated to Mr. Trump's inaugural committee. Everybody's into this. The Manhattan investigation grew out of the investigation into Michael Cohen. You know who he is, even though they take some time to tell you. Cohen is due to begin a prison sentence next month after pleading guilty to a range of crimes, including one campaign finance-related charge in which he implicated the president. Cohen has spent more than 70 hours with investigators with the Manhattan prosecutors and Mueller's team in raids of his office, home, and hotel room. I think, multiple, no. In April, FBI agents seized his cell phones, which included many dozens of voice recordings, mostly voicemail messages, according to people briefed on the seized material. One recording, Mr. Trump spoke to Cohen about payment to a woman who claimed to have had an affair with Mr. Trump, which he has denied. In another, different one, Cohen spoke to Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, who was a top official on the inaugural committee. She was fired as an advisor to the First Lady in early 2018 after the committee released its financial disclosures showing that entities controlled by Ms. Winston Wolkoff were paid $26 million. Now, it's amazing. They probably knew that they had paid her that. I'm surprised they fired her. The vast majority of those funds went to a subcontractor. Ms. Winston Wolkoff's company made $1.6 million commission from that $26 million, which officials have previously said went to pay 14 people. Actually, I think my recollection in reading about the way she handled things was I thought she had done things pretty straightforwardly. Most of the money went to subcontractors. That's not to say that she didn't rubber stamp some money laundering that way. But in terms of her own take, I don't think that was all that out of line. It's just that she had to do an awful lot of subcontracting. So they gave her a big lump sum, and the commission rate just happens to have totaled a fairly sizable amount of money. What is the rate on that, by the way? 1.6 million out of 26 million is like a 6% commission. I don't think that's all that outrageous. Is that right? Do I have that right? Have I done the math correctly? Maybe not. Did I do that backwards? Let's try that again. 26 million divided by 1.6, the other way around. Yeah, 16 is it's a lot more reasonable. But a 16%, even a 16% commission, I don't know what kind of commission they usually take on things like this, but I know advertising very often will mark up their things. They used to say 17% was their target number. So, I don't know. Didn't seem like that flagrant a violation. And she was the one, I think, I can't remember exactly what her role was, that or what it was that she did, but there was something that she had insisted on doing more transparently and saying, you can't just blah, blah, blah. You really have to take care to make sure that you don't do things this way. These will look terrible. I can't bring that incident to mind, though. All right. Let's see. We have a recommendation from Greg here. A really good read on the Pariah Caucus. Let's take a look at that. That does sound rather interesting. It might not be the next item up for bids, so to speak. But let's hold on to that one. It's illustrated with a photo of Steve King. They basically have nothing to do. A trio of Republicans face life in exile. Duncan Hunter, Chris Collins, and Steve King on the sidelines after being stripped of their committee assignments. I forgot that the other guys were too. Very interesting. Perhaps we'll take a look into that, or perhaps we'll pocket that for another day. Let me see what else I wanted to run down the line of what else is in pocket here, and see if there's any. The next one. Let's take a look at this one, because we've been on this beat too, and I guess it's semi follow-up. Politico with this story. Nancy Cook putting this one out early, very early this morning. The plan to keep Trump's taxes hidden, which has always been the plan, I guess. I don't know if they really ever had a plan per se. And even here, we don't really, what gets revealed here isn't so much a plan, so much as let's keep hiding the president's taxes. How will we do it? I don't know. Whenever they ask for them, we'll just say no. That's really the extent of the plan. Long story short, they just plan to refuse. The Trump administration wants to drag an expected Democratic request for the president's tax returns into a quagmire of arcane legal arguments. That's what the subheader says. Like I said, long story short is they're just going to say no. And when they say, well, what's your legal argument? They're going to say some words, and they might not make any sense. And then a judge will have to spend his time saying these words don't make any sense. You have to do this, and then they won't do it. And we'll be right back where we started. Who's going to make me do it? Well, court order, okay, but I'm not going to pay attention to it. All right, well, then I'm going to send the marshals. No, you're not. I'm the president of the United States, and I say the Department of Justice won't send marshals, and then we won't know what to do, and then we'll be in constitutional crisis, but no one will think of it that way because it's about his taxes, and Republicans will deal with the whole thing in bad faith and say privacy, blah, 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 is what's at stake here, not the constitutional confrontation. And enough people will believe that if some other thing comes up and Donald Trump tweets that somebody else is a son of a bitch for a different reason, we'll all turn to that, and he'll get away with another norm smashing. That's my prediction, and that's my prediction of what this article is going to say too. But here we go. Let's see if we're right. The new House Democratic majority is widely expected to test one of Donald Trump's ultimate red lines by demanding the president's personal tax returns. And the Trump administration has been gearing up for months to fight back hard. It's been a thing that people have had a lot of, there's been a lot of optimism or excitement about the idea that we're going to finally see his tax returns. You and I are not. But that somebody in charge of something somewhere was going to see these tax returns. I am not certain whether they will or they won't. I've never been certain that anything of real interest will be in those taxes other than proof that he doesn't pay very much, which is bad, but I think we've all known for a long time. And, but this all the optimism rests on, there's a law that says, and a rule that says that the chairs of the Ways and Means Committee, and maybe some other committees too, can get the tax returns of anybody if they need them for the course of an investigation, a legit investigation. So he'll have to, or there won't be any way for him to hide it. They'll request them, and the IRS will have to give them to members of Congress. And again, I remind you, as I do with every such instance, what if they just say no? The answer is nobody really knows, because nobody really does that. Back to the article. Trump's Treasury Department is readying plans to drag the expected Democratic requests for Trump's past tax filings, which he has closely guarded, I don't even know if that's the term for it, into a quagmire of arcane legal arguments. And I don't know if that's the word for what they're likely to try to do, legally speaking, but it makes it sound almost normal. At the same time, officials intend to publicly cast the request as a nakedly partisan exercise. The two-pronged scheme was developed by a handful of top political appointees and lawyers inside the department. Don't have to be a lawyer to come up with, just say no. With the ultimate goal of keeping the president's past returns private, according to 4 people familiar with the administration's approach. Ask me, I'm familiar with the administration's approach. I agree. 5 out of 5 people familiar with the administration's approach agree. They're simply going to say, go fly a kite. The strategy will hinge on an argument that politically motivated Democrats will inevitably leak Trump's tax information, a felony in of itself, if the IRS hands over the documents. So, because Democrats can't be trusted to keep the documents private, they shouldn't get them in the first place, officials will insist. Treasury officials have been waiting since early January for a top Democrat to make the request. I hope there's some explanation in the body of this as to why that qualifies as even an arcane legal argument. That's just a regular argument. It has no basis in legal anything. They're going to make that argument to a judge. That doesn't make it an arcane legal argument. It's just saying, no, we think that it will cause problems for our client. There's nothing arcane about that. Let's see if there's more. The battle between Treasury and the Democrats could plunge the country into yet another norm-breaking moment for the Trump presidency, with the fight stretching on for months and well into the 2020 campaign. What happens if the Treasury Secretary just doesn't answer or sends back a note saying, "We refuse to do what you're saying," says George Yin, a former chief of staff on the House Joint Committee on Taxation, one of the 3 congressional committees involved in major tax issues on Capitol Hill. To my knowledge, that has never happened. We are essentially in uncharted territory if he refuses. I've been charting it for you, but I don't draw very well, so I'll accept that. It is uncharted. A Treasury Department spokeswoman would only say, Secretary Mnuchin will review any request with the Treasury General Counsel for legality. Of course. Sure. Even in a normal situation, you would do that. But they're not actually doing that. They're just like, well, we have 3 days to a week to say anything before anybody actually demands with a follow-up question, what are you guys going to do about it? We can say we're studying it for that long. After that, we're going to have to say something else. But no is okay. We can just say that. The situation is unprecedented because presidential candidates typically release their tax information during campaigns. But as he has often done, Trump bucked the tradition in 2016. What a maverick. Citing an ongoing IRS audit. By the way, how about a national emergency to end the IRS audit? You have unchallenged authority to declare such an emergency, I am told, by Kellyanne Conway, constitutional scholar. How about ending that audit? You can't because there's no audit, but whatever. You could make a show of it. You lie all the time. The refusal sparked feverish speculation among liberals about what he might be hiding in his tax returns. The potential fight would usher into the political arena 2 of Washington's most reluctant protagonists. Mnuchin is viewed inside the administration as one of the president's most loyal aides, but not the savviest political operator or liaison to Congress. The White House largely kept him off the Hill during the final weeks of discussions about the tax reform package after he irritated some House Republicans during a previous debt ceiling negotiation. And Massachusetts Representative Richard Neal, and by the way, I'm curious, I don't remember offhand, but my guess, knowing Mnuchin and House Republicans, is that he irritated them by saying, yeah, playing games with the debt ceiling is suicide, don't do it. Oh, wow, that's irritating. Keep him away from us. And the president says, yeah, you're right. We should absolutely keep the one possibly accidentally responsible party I have in my cabinet away from these negotiations about something as trivial and stupid as the debt ceiling. Anyway, Continuing on, Massachusetts Representative Richard Neal, the Democratic chair of the Tax Writing House Ways and Means Committee, is far more interested in discussing the taxation of retirement savings or the tax portions of Obamacare than he is in playing prosecutor to land Trump's tax returns, according to 4 former top congressional aides familiar with Neal's working style. The Democratic leadership and the president will demand political theater on this, and that component is out of character for Mnuchin, said one Republican close to the administration. He will have to make sure he is articulating his points to keep Republicans in line on the Hill and keep the president supportive. That is not his natural skill set. The White House press office did not respond to a request for comment. Democrats' legal standing to request Trump's tax returns is fairly unambiguous, according to several tax attorneys, but it does come with a few key caveats. From the standpoint of the law, it could not be more straightforward or clear. That is the easy part, added Yin, who now works as a professor of law and taxation at the University of Virginia. The Internal Revenue Code gives 3 congressional committees responsible for taxes the ability to request the returns of any individual or business. Often the Senate Finance Committee or House Ways and Means Committee will request returns during an investigation to check a certain deduction or type of spending without anyone ever knowing the committee accessed them. But whatever the members or staffers find must remain private. And that's where the request for Trump's returns becomes potentially tricky for Democrats. A related section within the Internal Revenue Code says any federal employees who leak tax information is committing a felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. We are worried about leaks, said one source familiar with the administration's strategy. Once we share it with any member of Congress, we assume it becomes a public document. Probably not a bad guess. If the House Ways and Means Committee doesn't want to make Trump's tax returns public, then it will need to vote as a committee before taking a full vote in the House, and that could also take weeks if they do want to make them public. We'll be right back. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with what's happening inside the Ways and Means Committee on the possibility of demanding Trump's tax returns. Again, just to clarify, if the committee does want to make the returns public, and I assume that there would be tremendous pressure to do that, which, honestly, I mean, no, and maybe and that may be the reason why Neal is not interested in doing it, is that there's probably not that much in there that's really necessary to make public that will reveal a whole lot, other than to confirm that, there might be a few things that might be of some interest. Like he takes this or that deduction and everybody knows that's ridiculous. That's meant for small businesses. But he really does run a relatively small business. But it usually doesn't qualify under the guidelines established. He bends the rules, and it's also part of one of the ways he uses his many LLCs through which he holds a lot of his property is to claim that each individual LLC is entitled to small business deductions of all sorts, because the LLC formed for the exclusive purpose of holding the ownership papers to a certain condo unit in one of his towers, for instance. That's a thing with assets of, on the high side, $2 million, perhaps a $2 million penthouse suite somewhere, something like that. That qualifies in some respects for tax breaks for small businesses. The fact that it's part of a larger umbrella organization apparently either doesn't matter in terms of taxes or does matter, but they figure the IRS has so much work on its plate that they'll never notice that, 218 North Park LLC is part of the Trump organization. They just say, this small business, 218 North Park LLC, has assets underneath the threshold, and so they qualify for this. and they're not going to look any further into the ownership of 218 North Park LLC. That might very well be happening. And a more thorough audit probably would put Trump on the hook for several $1 million extra each year, but they never bothered to do it. But that's not what people think they're going to get out of the tax returns, which is weird because they think they're going to get something on Russia. And why would you put down, spy income in your tax returns? I doubt very much whether any of that is in there. There might be some things that help as evidence, indirect evidence of money laundering that's been proven elsewhere with other evidence. But I doubt very much whether there's going to be direct evidence of major crimes in his tax returns, just petty cheating and maybe some hints about other entities that we don't know the names of yet that might lead us somewhere when we scour through their books and find out that they wrote checks to Michael Cohen or Oleg Deripaska for that matter. And then it would spark interest. I mean, it's not worthless. It's just not something that's likely to reveal a great deal to the general public that they need to know without it being digested elsewhere first, typically by people who have subpoena power independent of the Ways and Means Committee is what I'm saying. So what will likely happen is they'll get a bunch of juicy stuff about places where he cheated the public out of a couple thousand or maybe even a couple $100,000 in taxes here and there. And that's worth knowing, but then it'll be fall to, Richard Neal to shepherd through a vote on whether or not to release them. And there'll be lots of pressure to release them because there's lots of excitement about it, but there's really not that much in there. And it's going to make him super uncomfortable. And really, honestly, they'd be better off just leaving well enough alone in some cases. But I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see what they come up with. Anyway, so if he does want to make the returns public, or I guess any portion of it, it's going to have to go through the committee and then have a full vote in the House. And it'll be very politically charged, obviously. Richard Neal, who has been in the House since 1988, has yet to ask the Treasury Department in writing for Trump's tax returns, angering the more liberal members of his caucus who say they won the midterm elections by promising greater oversight of the Trump administration, which is not the same thing, actually, but okay. Neal does not have any specific time frame for requesting the tax returns, but he does intend to do it, said a Democratic congressional aide. Last week, Neal told CNN he was moving quite judiciously, as we will, as we've learned from Karl Rove in the past. This is the beginning of a court case. I think the idea here is to avoid the emotion of the moment and make sure that the product stands up under critical analysis, Neal said. Sounds pretty reasonable, actually. At the Treasury Department, a small, trusted team of top officials have been working on the potential response to the Democratic request, including the general counsel for both Treasury and the IRS, as well as the legislative affairs team. The response will be one of the first major tests for Brian McGuire, a former chief of staff for Senator Mitch McConnell, who sucks, and who is now serving as Treasury's new counselor to the Secretary for Legislative Affairs. The Secretary, that is, of the Treasury for Legislative Affairs. You get it? All right. McGuire started his new job in January just as the Democrats regained control of the House. He's been tasked with helping to respond to all congressional oversight inquiries. The question of Trump's tax returns is just one of many issues now dogging the Treasury Department. After being shuttered for 35 days as part of the partial government shutdown, the department is also contending with the start of tax filing season, greater scrutiny from a number of congressional committees, and ongoing debates over sanctions. Just last week, Mnuchin announced sanctions against the state-held oil company in Venezuela during a briefing at the White House. The only certainty now in the upcoming debate over Trump's returns is that it will last for months, if not the remainder of the first term of his presidency. The statute is silent on the timing of releasing returns to the committee. Yin added, depending on the nature of the request, some delay may be necessary to comply. That's actually the end of the article. What also, of course, isn't addressed is what happens if they just say no? And, well, we've been over that territory, and it's a question of whether the requesting committee then wants to declare the Treasury Department to be in contempt of Congress, and whether they want to pursue that as an inherent contempt claim or want to attempt first to pursue it as a statutory contempt claim and see if the Department of Justice will prosecute Department of Treasury officials for non-compliance, or whether the whole thing is waved off by Trump or someone else within the administration, and then they have to decide whether they want to drop it or pursue it in court, until they finally and at last lose, and then consider inherent contempt, but then point at the calendar and say, oh my God, it's an election year and we can't do it, which is the most likely outcome of all. But there you go. The plan is to say no, and there's no, I don't think we ever answered the question. There's nothing arcane invoked in any of this. They're just saying we're not going to turn over the materials you request. One, because we don't want to, but two, the only argument being made is we think you'll leak it, which is obvious in a way, and so therefore not arcane, and not really even a legal argument either, except that they're going to present it to a judge. Now, if it works and other people can do it later, then I guess it's a legal argument. And I guess it's just a potential legal argument now. Will a judge accept the idea that the worry that members of Congress or staff will leak the information is reason enough to deny what the statute very plainly states, that they are entitled to receive this information? If a judge says yes, then it's a legal argument. If the judge says no, then it's just a failed legal argument. It's just a regular argument. And there's nothing legal about it. It won't help you or anybody else until the next time you try it again. And again, remember, that's not beyond them either. Losing in court on this question, should the same or similar question arise later on, the administration will not hesitate to make the same argument, and the judge will say, didn't you hear us the first time when we talked about the tax returns? And the administration's lawyers will say, yeah, I just thought that since that was about something you were requesting from the IRS, and this is something you were requesting from the Department of the Interior, that maybe, that might be different. It's a different set of facts. Well, same operative logic. No, you're wrong and you don't deserve to be here. All right, just checking. 6 months have passed. That's how long it took you to say that. And that's 6 more months closer to the election. And that's really what we were after in the first place. And there will be no sanctions for that, I promise you. Okay. Let's see. Moving on to other topics, just having infuriated you with that one. Let's see. Let's turn to the article that, is this one Greg gave us yesterday, or is this a different one? I know the topic was covered by at least one or two writers, but let's see. I'm just curious. Did I have another one, or is this it? All right, well, we'll go to this one. This is Greg Sargent writing at the Plumb Line about the national emergency ploy that Trump continues to threaten with respect to construction of the wall. If Trump declares a national emergency, Pelosi can jam Republicans. Here's how. Long story short on this one, we discussed it yesterday. Pelosi can hold a vote to reject the idea of the national emergency. It's essentially reject the premise. And then, according to procedure, the Senate has 15 days to consider the same measure. And again, we simply ask, what if they don't? And there's a little bit of blank filled in this one. I don't know. See here, I know I'm pretty sure that I saw somebody else addressing this besides Greg Sargent, and who gave a pretty good answer in terms of what if. But I don't know, did I not put that one away in pocket? I think I tweeted about it. And, I think I can recall the argument if we can't recall the actual writing. But I like the idea of being able to read other people's more considered and better formulated arguments than trying to wing it. But here we go. Greg Sargent first. Senate Republicans appear to be in a panic about President Trump's threat to declare a national emergency to realize his unquenchable fantasy of a big, beautiful wall on the southern border. Republicans are reportedly worried that such a move could divide them, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has delivered that warning to Trump in private conversations. Republicans have good reason to be deeply nervous. Here's why. According to one of the country's leading experts on national emergencies, it appears that the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, can trigger a process that could requires what it says, the GOP-controlled Senate to hold a vote on such a declaration by Trump, which would put Senate Republicans in a horrible political position. And that's all. Trump reiterated his threat to declare a national emergency in an interview with CBS News that aired over the weekend. I don't take anything off the table, Trump said, adding a typically mangled construction that he still retains the alternative of national emergency. But Pelosi has recourse against such a declaration, and if she exercises it, Senate Republicans may have to vote on where they stand on it. Trump does have the power to declare such an emergency under the Post-Watergate National Emergencies Act, which also requires him to identify which other specific statute delegating emergency powers he's invoking. However, what if he doesn't do that? I don't know. Trump is expected to rely on one of several statutes that authorize military officials in a presidentially declared emergency to redirect funds for purposes that are either essential to the national defense or support use of the armed forces. The Post reports that acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney has privately told Trump that a national emergency is viable, and officials at the Army Corps of Engineers are searching for ways to build the wall. This would be challenged in the courts, which would have to decide whether the statute Trump invoked actually does authorize this type of spending. But Pelosi has a much more immediate way to challenge Trump's declaration under the National Emergencies Act. Both chambers of Congress can pass a resolution terminating any presidentially declared national emergency. What can she do? Elizabeth Goitin, whose name we're probably mispronouncing, who has researched this topic extensively for the Brennan Center for Justice, tells me that if Pelosi exercises this option, it will ultimately require the Senate to vote on it in some form as well. And this is actually the response that I was thinking of, so it is contained in this article. In some form is the key phrase here. The NEA stipulates that if one chamber, Pelosi's House, for instance, passes such a resolution, which it could easily do, the other, McConnell's Senate in this case, must act on it within a very short period of time, forcing, I like to say, GOP senators to choose whether to support it. See what's happening here? Okay. Alternatively, Goitin notes, the Senate could vote not to consider that resolution, or change its rules to avoid such a vote, or do nothing, I guess, is my answer, and say, the rules say that, so what? Or I deny that the rules say that, so what on top of that? And by majority vote, they can either change the rules or change the interpretation of the rules, or vote not to consider it. They could vote to table the resolution, or ignore it altogether, is what I say. But, and here's their counter-argument, in those scenarios, the Senate would, in effect, be voting to greenlight Trump's emergency declaration. Yeah, well, they would, and we kind of expected that they would vote to greenlight it in the first place, and I guess the idea here is, well, there's so many Republicans who say it's a bad idea, and there are lots of people who threaten to vote against it, and I don't know. I say you have to hold that vote because you never know with these guys whether they're going to show up to do the thing they said they were going to do, or whether they're going to Jeff Flake it and walk away. But the argument here is, I say, well, what if they just don't do it? And their answer is, well, if they don't do it, then they will have, in effect, voted to table the resolution. And then people can hold them responsible for having voted to table the resolution. The thing is, people very rarely elect to hold people responsible for procedural votes. You know, why did you vote to okay the national emergency? I didn't. But it says here you voted to not consider the resolution of disapproval. Now I voted to table it, to consider it later. Or I did nothing of the sort. I didn't vote at all. Yeah, but you were being asked to vote. The rules say you had to vote within 15 days on the resolution of disapproval. And you didn't do that. That's your fault. Okay. So you basically approved the national emergency declaration. No, I just didn't do anything. You know, so this argument could go on forever. So all that underwrites the whole idea that Pelosi can jam Trump on this is they can make the Senate say, well, I'll just have to tell my constituents that I didn't vote for it. Or, you know, if they wanted me to vote for it, I say, then you can tell them, well, I voted to table the thing, or I voted, you know, in caucus not to take up the resolution. There's nothing that says what happens, essentially, if you don't abide by the rule that says you have to take this resolution up within 15 days. There's no teeth in the rule, so why would you do it? And the answer is you probably wouldn't, unless you wanted politically to set yourself up in opposition to the president. And there's some evidence that some critical mass of Republicans might be interested in doing that. But all there is that underlies this is the idea that Republicans would be politically embarrassed to refuse to take up this resolution. The answer to that is, come on, get real. These guys don't get embarrassed about things. They'll do that. That doesn't bother them in the least. Back to the article. The NEA, the National Emergencies Act, lays out a timetable for this process, and by Goitin's reading, I wonder what I'm doing to her name, it would all take place within the protracted period of barely longer than a month. That's not protracted, but okay. In short, there could be 36 days between the introduction of the resolution in the House and a vote on the Senate floor, Goitin told me. But that vote would have to happen, except it wouldn't. And once it did, one way or the other, it would put the senators on record. A Democratic leadership aide tells me the House might opt for this move if Trump takes the plunge. The House will vigorously challenge any declaration that seeks an end run around Congress's power of the purse, the aide says. And last section, or next section here, I guess, sorry, there's more. Why Republicans are panicking. Republicans themselves have let it be known that they fear this scenario. Senator John Cornyn of Texas, an advisor to McConnell, has said that a Senate vote on any Trump-declared national emergency would be inevitable, and McConnell has told Trump that Congress might have to act in such a fashion. Both of these appear to be references to a scenario like the one outlined above. And I think that's probably the best argument for them just saying, to hell with it, we'll have the vote. It's not the best reason for them to have the vote. It's the best reason to predict that they won't simply say, we're not going to do it. I'm just pointing out that they could do that and that there's not much in the way of consequences. So there's still time for Trump to try to convince them, just don't do anything with it. But they're hinting that their preference really would be to say no to the national emergency declaration, and they might even be serious about that. On the other hand, you have Lindsey Graham out there for the last day or so saying, really, that Republicans have to get in line behind Trump on the wall, even if it's through a national emergency declaration, or else. No one's really sure what the or else is, but he's basically fully on the bandwagon, so I don't know. Maybe he convinces more people than McConnell. Both men, Cornyn and McConnell, have also said this would deeply divide Republicans. One unnamed Republican senator even told the Washington Examiner that Trump would suffer major defections in such a vote. I think he's already suffering major defects, but we're not sure who's responsible for those. GOP senators would have to decide between going on record in favor of a presidential declaration of a national emergency for something that everyone knows is based on false pretenses, a move that would be opposed by 2/3 of the country, or opposing it and possibly forcing a Trump veto, which they would then have to decide whether to override, enraging Trump's base. Indeed, it's worse than this. This under the subject of subtitle of Trump loves his pliable acting cabinet members. This is interesting too. We talked about this a little bit yesterday at the end of the show. Indeed, it's far worse than this. The Wall Street Journal reports that Trump is privately satisfied with many. Does this relate to? Is this an AMP version of this, by the way? I don't think so. But you know the way he works. I'm trying to figure out is this? Yeah, I guess this is it. Sometimes Greg Sargent just shifts topics entirely mid-column because he covers 2 or 3 different things, and I'm not certain whether this is what he's doing here. The Wall Street Journal reports that Trump is privately satisfied with his many acting cabinet members, that is, ones who haven't been confirmed by the Senate, because they are more beholden to the Oval Office, which is why you're supposed to do things the other way. Under a national emergency, it would fall to Trump's acting defense secretary, Pat Shanahan, to make the wall happen and perhaps to make a public case for what everyone knows is utter nonsense. And here is embedded Michael Bender's tweet about the Wall Street Journal article saying that Trump likes having these vacancies filled by acting secretaries. But as Julian Sanchez points out, avoiding this is exactly why we have the process of Senate confirmation. I just pointed it out too. As Alexander Hamilton wrote, it is supposed to deter a president from filling important slots with people who possess a pliancy that will render them obsequious instruments of his pleasure, which he didn't really know how much double entendre he was including in there because he didn't anticipate Donald Trump. But who knows? Alexander Hamilton might have been quite a libertine. That, of course, is exactly what Trump wants from his underlings. It's what he demands from them. So we could be looking at a remarkable scenario. The acting defense secretary, who would realize the wall, without authorization from Congress, won't have been confirmed by the upper chamber, which may then end up declining to block Trump's national emergency, neutering itself further. And so, GOP senators are basically pleading with Trump not to force them into the position of choosing between that scenario and acting to terminate Trump's emergency. Of course, the latter would make the shrinking Trump base very, very angry, which may be the most terrifying outcome to them of all. So, it is quite the conundrum. The answer essentially to do they have to vote is no. And all we have by way of keeping this an idea worth considering at all is, well, at least you would then know that they are hypocrites and norm breakers and cowards. Well, we know that already. So is it worth demonstrating again? Maybe. Sure. Why not? Let's push everything to the limit and see what happens. I can't oppose it, but I don't want to raise anyone's hopes about a serious and huge confrontation, just finally blowing up the Republican Party. There'll be lots of confusion and people who are uncomfortable and maybe no results, and maybe that's enough. Just lots of discomfort. I'll take it. But it's not the same thing as getting something done, I guess. We'll put it that way. Okay, let's see. We got another break coming up here in just a minute or so, and then we'll plunge into one or two other stories to round out this Tuesday. And I'll use the break to try and figure out exactly which direction it will be that will go, and check in on user comments, make sure we haven't missed anything along the way. Well, there's some interesting stuff here. Rebecca, thanks for sending this one in. We'll preview that. Just sneak or give you a tease. It involves Ivanka Trump. That's a weird one. We'll take a look at that when we come back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption, though it's still aimed at saying thank you to all of you who are supporters of the show. We've made a lot of progress. When we first started this campaign, fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners were donating to help keep us on the air, and now that's down to about 1 in 15, but we've got a long way to go. Remember, it won't take much. Our average monthly donation is currently about $7. For which you're getting 2 hours of great news and entertainment 5 days a week. What's that, 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. But as a wage, well, I think Democrats would be against that. But if we all put our 70 cents together, or even half of us, that'd really be something. And my kids could go to college. Now, that's not all on you. But remember, patreon.com, Patreon.com, is there to make it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X, or David Waldman, or Kagro in the Morning, or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right there where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your continuing support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Hard to decide where to go next. Let's tease something else too, but first we'll, I guess we owe you the follow-up on the thing that involved, or apparently involved, Ivanka Trump that Rebecca Romans had sent to us. Doesn't in fact involve her, just involves the invocation of the very idea of Ivanka Trump. This is just random note here. From, as reported by The Hill, she just says, I'll just leave this here. A DC art exhibit features Ivanka Trump look-alike vacuuming up crumbs thrown by visitors. I'm curious about that only in the sense that some money exchanged hands somewhere along the line, and somebody got paid to facilitate this, and I don't know how. And it's not so much that I want to put a stop to it as it is to figure out, can I get money for stuff like this? Because what a great life. I'm sure that person thinks work sucks and they'd love to chuck it, and you'd have to be an idiot to want this job. But how do I get paid for, like, here, you stand here and vacuum up crumbs that they throw, and somehow I'm going to get money out of this? I don't know. This is a particular genius in setting these things up, and maybe it's harder work than I think. A new art exhibit allows visitors to toss crumbs at an Ivanka Trump look-alike who swiftly vacuums them up with a smile on her face. Is this misogynist? I don't know. The art piece from Cultural DC is called Ivanka Vacuuming. That is a great name. Somebody got money for that, too, I bet. And features a model meant to resemble a 37-year-old White House advisor and daughter to President Trump. Guests to the Flashpoint Gallery in Washington are invited to throw crumbs onto a plush pink carpet and watch as the Trump double makes them disappear with the help of a vacuum over and over again. But is it art? There you go. The piece from New York-based artist Jennifer Rubel is simultaneously a visual celebration of a contemporary feminine icon, a portrait of our own relationship to that figure, and a questioning of our complicity in her role-playing, according to a news release. Well, F that news release. I'm going to punch that news release in the face. Wow. The viewer throwing crumbs and Ivanka vacuuming them is not a stand-in for one feeling, one relationship, or one point of view towards this powerful and sexualized female form. The release says somebody got money for writing this. It is intentionally open to multiple, often contradictory interpretations that are as critical of the interpreter as they are on the subject. Shame on you! I guess. Art. I gotta tell you. Rubel, R-U-B-E-L-L, called the interaction with her creation complicated, saying in a statement that visitors enjoy hurling the crumbs. I am certain that they do. That is the icky truth at the center of the work. That's a term of art, about art, by the way, icky. It's funny. It's pleasurable. It makes us feel powerful, and we want to do it even more. I mean, I imagine that there's some overwhelming temptation to really fling them hard at the person, but that's not Ivanka Trump. And even if it was, that wouldn't be a good idea. So, I don't know. I mean, I get the idea that it works on multiple levels. It's just that I don't care about any of those levels. Me and art. I'm sorry. It's one of those things. And, I should be more open to it, but it reminds me of a lot of arguments we had in college about this with art students. But okay. Is it unworthy? No. Should it not be paid for? Yeah, probably. But, should this podcast be paid for? I guess not. I don't know. I'm creating intellectual property just like she is, I guess. How about that? From now, tomorrow's show is, I'm going to run the vacuum. That's the thing. And what it does is it challenges you to imagine that Ivanka is here doing it. You don't know that she's not, right? So it's art. Ugh. All right. Well, anyway, also, we know that she'll keep vacuuming whether we do it or not, so it's not really our fault, right? Is that true? Does she not turn the vacuum off even when no one's throwing crumbs? Admission to the performance art exhibit is free. That's good news. All the crumb-filled cleaning action, that's good, is also being live streamed each evening while it's on display through February 17th. So that's good news. So I don't know. I don't know who's getting paid. It's free. It's being underwritten. There's a grant has been made that somebody is able to make because somebody else who's rich gave them a check at a charity ball in the height of the social season in Manhattan last year. And quite honestly, Sandman, this is Viper Command, bomb the whole place, start over. I don't know. It's not the worst thing in the world, but, Rebecca, you knew this was going to happen when you sent it. And that's why you did it. And if you keep throwing those little crumbs of stupid stories about crumbs at me, I'll keep reading it. But it's not really your fault, is it? Because it's going to happen regardless. It's art. Where's my grant? What time is it? When can I go back to bed? Can I get money for that? I think so. Shoo! This world, I got to tell you. All right. Back to things that might matter. Let's see. Good. Oh, this is right. Oh, I forgot. Oh, I see. Now I feel like I'm in trouble. Jack Ox is answering me, who's an artist. And this was bad idea, I think. Even though I don't think she's going to defend this piece. What is art? Oh, I'm in trouble. I, a real artist, want to know. I can't tell you. Most of the stuff out there is pretty dumb and limited. That is the process. I, by the way, am an artist scientist and would not dare to put out a dumb piece like that. Okay. I'm relieved to know that I haven't offended you like you did. I put out a vacuuming piece with Eric Trump last week, and I am willing to bet, she continues, that no one got paid for this. Okay. Well, you know what? Shoo. Good. Except for the model who deserves to get paid for this. Most artists are willing to work for free and sell their stuff for less than it cost them to make it. What a racket. The art world is financed by artists. That's true. And it is a racket, and it's just not a particularly profitable one, I guess. All right. So they're all passing money around in smaller amounts to one another, the way the charity ball set do in larger amounts. And we should probably concentrate our fire on the waste happening at the top and see if just a little bit of that can shake out for the bottom. Yeah, apparently nobody's getting paid because it's free exhibit, but the whole space, like how do you structure that? Money has to change hands somewhere, right? I mean, I guess the owner of the gallery also could be charging nothing, but that's an opportunity cost. And I guess they think that maybe by attracting attention with this installation, if that's what they call it, that they'll get some extra cachet for their gallery. And the next thing that they do, they can charge admission for. I don't know. Not sure how this works. I shouldn't begrudge them the probably small amount of money that is involved in all of this. This is true. But if it turns out to be large, I'm definitely begrudging that. That I'm doing at 70% on the margin. All right. Good point. And I was worried that I was going to be in more trouble for that one than anything else. And she continues, by the way, one of the biggest rackets is talking people into going to art school so their teachers can earn a living. All right. I think you have a good point there. So, all right. We'll rein in the outrage. There are other items that we should be outraged about. And I guess in a related one, Rebecca has sent me a couple of things here. One, the tweet of Derek Cressman commenting, "Ain't that rich?" Eric Trump now says Americans shouldn't be handed things. They must work for it. And that is awfully rich coming from him. Let's see. Others, let's see. Rebecca's other contribution here. The Hill reporting that ex-White House aides are saying watching TV is a part of Trump's workflow. And so it's not so bad that he has so much executive time. He's working. True. And also raising our attention to the continuing progress of the nomination of Naomi Rao to Brett Kavanaugh's old seat on the D.C. circuit. She's getting her confirmation hearing this morning. We may catch up with that storyline with Joan tomorrow. Let's see. Other things that I want to share with you. What else can I cram in here? I said there was going to be another callback story in here somewhere. What was it going to be? I've been scrolled back to the top of my pocket page here. Let's see. We got this one in there. We got that one about acting secretaries. The inaugural committee is in there. The Trump's taxes staying hidden. This one I want to save for another day. Republicans can get jammed by Pelosi. We did that one. Where did we want to go with this one? All right. Wow. There's a lot of things here. Okay. Let's try this one. Let's skip over to here. The one that I thought actually was going to save for another day that got a lot of attention yesterday. CNN with an exclusive report. Now we're going to take the exclusivity right out of it. Interesting report. I don't know how, let's see, scroll through and see how long this thing is. See if we think we can fit it in. Sold to an ally, lost to an enemy. There's a couple of layers of interest in this piece about, the subheader tells us, the U.S. shipped weapons and secrets to the Saudis and the Emiratis. Now, some are in the hands of fighters linked to Al-Qaeda and Iran. This byline here, Nima Elbagir, or Elbagir, I'm not certain how they break that up, Salma Abdelaziz, Mohammed Abu El Gate, and Laura Smith Spark, the only Anglo-named person in the whole lineup here that I was able to read without problems. But I guess a number of reporters here with real connections in the Middle East filling us in on this. Some of this shocking, some of it won't come as a surprise. Let's begin. The story is datelined in Yemen, Hodeidah, Yemen. I'm guessing at the pronunciation there. Saudi Arabia, or Saud-owned Arabia, as I call it, and its coalition partners have transferred American-made weapons to Al-Qaeda-linked fighters. Oh no. Hardline Salafi militias and other factions waging war in Yemen in violation of their agreements with the United States, a CNN investigation has found. Not hard to predict, really. The weapons have also made their way into hands of Iranian-backed rebels battling the coalition for control of the country, exposing some of America's sensitive military technology to Tehran and potentially endangering the lives of U.S. troops in other conflict zones. Some of this, and I guess the multiple layers of this that we may not get to or may not actually be revealed in the article is some of this is us giving the Sauds and the Emiratis the weapons that they use in the war in Yemen or elsewhere for that matter. And they lose on the battlefield and are captured by the enemy and so therefore fall into the hands of, in this case, Iran-backed rebels. And some of this is very directly provided to Al-Qaeda linked fighters by the Sauds, because what's essentially happening, I think, in the Yemen war is that there's a clash between Sunni and Shia Muslims there, and the Shia are backed by, or widely believed to be backed by, Tehran, the country being overwhelmingly Shia, and the Sunnis backed by the Sauds and Emiratis, who are likewise Sunni, but also among the more extremist militant Sunnis are outfits like Al-Qaeda, and ISIS for that matter. And so sometimes the lines get blurred a little bit, and it could be somebody that the Saud family believes are quote unquote good guys in this war, are handed weapons to fight the good guys fight, but they're not that good, or they turn out not to be that good, or they're very well known to not be all that good, but because they don't say, "Hi, I'm from Al-Qaeda," the Sauds don't have to write that down and give that to us, and we don't get mad about it. We say they gave it to some other unpronounceable group that we never heard of, but it is basically the same thing, but we're a bunch of ignorant Americans and we don't know. So there's a little bit of both going on here. Saudi Arabia, Saud-owned Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, its main partner in the war, have used the U.S. manufactured weapons as a form of currency to buy the loyalties of militias or tribes, bolster chosen armed actors, warlords, and influence the complex political landscape, to say the least, according to local commanders on the ground and analysts who spoke to CNN. Buying the loyalty of local militias or tribes. That's just a reminder, why I say things like Saud-owned Arabia. The whole place is just a matter of which tribe comes out on top. As I've pointed out in the past, this could be Rashidi Arabia, just as easily as it is Saudi Arabia. It just matters which tribe wins the war when the national flag and join the UN truck comes around, and we have to hang the shingle out as something. This area of land has to be something. We'll pretend it's a country. Who owns this? The Saud family? It's Saudi Arabia. Who owns this? The Rashid family? Rashidi Arabia. Fine. Whatever you want. And if the Rashids had better weapons and we provided them to them, well, that's what we would call the country. So, the song remains the same, is what we're saying here. Okay. By handing off this military equipment to third parties, the Saud-led coalition is breaking the terms of its arms sales with the U.S., according to the Department of Defense. After CNN presented its findings, a U.S. defense official confirmed there was an ongoing investigation into the issue. Oh, you caught them. You're right. That shouldn't have happened. We'll investigate, and it'll depend on, nothing probably, but do we cut them off? No, because remember how proud Jared Kushner and Donald Trump were of the $100 billion, whatever deal, and we can't cut them off, and even though that was garbage, this will only make things go south on the big deal that didn't happen anyway in the first place, and they'll find reason to conclude that nothing should change. The revelations raise fresh questions about whether the U.S. has lost control over a key ally, yes, presiding over one of the most horrific wars in the past decade, and whether Saud-owned Arabia is responsible enough to be allowed to continue buying the sophisticated arms and fighting hardware. They are not, but there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of money, and that's a lot of jobs, and so blah, blah, blah. So that's the answer. Previous CNN investigations established that U.S.-made weapons were used in a series of deadly Saud coalition attacks that killed dozens of civilians, many of them children, although that was the intended use of the weapons, and we should be embarrassed about that instead. The developments also come as Congress, outraged with Riyadh over the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi last year, considers whether to force an end to the Trump administration's support of the Saud-led coalition, which relies on American weapons to conduct its war, and free gas, by the way. Remember, we are refueling their planes to make these bombing runs and neglecting to charge them for the gas. In 2015, Riyadh launched a coalition to oust Iranian-supported Houthi, I'm still hoping that's the pronunciation, rebels from the country's capital and reinstate the internationally recognized government of President Abdu Rabu Mansur Hadi. The war split the country in two, and with it came the weapons, not just guns, but anti-tank missiles, armored vehicles, heat-seeking lasers, and artillery, all flooding into an unruly and complex state. That is a generous description. But there we are, by the way, once again, ousting an elected government because reasons. Since then, some of America's beautiful military equipment, he's such an idiot, as U.S. President Donald Trump once called it, has been passed on, sold, stolen, or abandoned in Yemen's state of chaos, where murky alliances and fractured politics mean little hope for any system of accountability or tracking. Some terror groups have gained from the influx of U.S. arms, they usually do, with the barrier of entry to advanced weaponry now lowered by the laws of supply and demand. Militia leaders have had ample opportunity to obtain military hardware in exchange for the manpower to fight the Houthi militias. Arms dealers have flourished, with traders offering to buy or sell anything, from a U.S. manufactured rifle to a tank to the highest bidder. And Iran's proxies have captured American weapons they can exploit for vulnerabilities or reverse engineer for native production. How interesting is that? By the way, how interesting is this story in light of notorious spy Mike Flynn's brilliant plan to give the same actors access to nuclear facilities and nuclear fuel and, I guess, breeder reactors, essentially, even though they'll be, quote unquote, under our control. This stuff was supposed to be under our control. We were supposed to have contractual control of these weapons, and poof, they're in the hands of Al-Qaeda linked militias. Why not add nuclear power fuel cells to that list? What could go wrong? The next section, I'll just read one more here. Do you have American guns here? In the narrow, ramshackle streets of Taiz's historic district, weapons shops lie tucked between women's clothing stores. Arms markets are illegal in Yemen, but that doesn't stop them operating openly in this large mountainous city in the country's southwest. To one side hang veils, abayas, and colorful dresses for sale, and to the other, pistols, hand grenades, and U.S. assault rifles available on special order. In one arms market, sweets were displayed among the ammunition. Do you have American guns here? CNN asked. The American guns are expensive and sought after, the weapons trader replied in an exchange captured by undercover CNN cameras. In another of the city's markets, a very young-looking boy handled weapons like an expert. Men joked and chewed khat, K-H-A-T, a commonly used drug, and the atmosphere was casual. But these shops don't just take individual orders, they can supply militias. And it's this not-so-hidden black market that in part is driving the demand for high-tech American weapons and perpetuating the cycle of violence in Yemen. That's not good. Once the intellectual heart of the country, Taiz is now a tinderbox that set off a war within a war last year when the various militias, backed by the Saud-led coalition, turned their guns on each other. Amid the chaos of the broader war, and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, as we sometimes call it, made its way to the front lines in Taiz in 2015, forging advantageous alliances with the pro-Saud militias they fought alongside. One of those militias linked to AQAP, the Abu Abbas Brigade, now possesses U.S.-made Oshkosh armored vehicles. I thought they just made overalls. Paraded in a 2015 show of force through the city. So Al-Qaeda got its own military parade before Trump did. Abu Abbas, the founder, was declared a terrorist by the U.S. in 2017, but the group still enjoys support from the Saud-owned and Saud-led coalition and was absorbed into the coalition-supported 35th Brigade of the Yemeni Army. Wow, how do you like that? Oshkosh Defense strictly follows all U.S. laws and regulations regarding or relating to export control, the firm told CNN. So it's not our fault. And there are deadlier forms of weaponry that have made their way into the city. In October of 2015, military forces loyal to the government boasted on Saudi and UAE-backed media that the Sauds had airdropped American-made TOW anti-tank missiles on the same front line where AQAP has been known to operate at the time. Local officials confirmed that the airdrop happened, but CNN's attempt to conduct further interviews were blocked, and the team was intimidated by the local government. A local activist joked that the weapons had probably been sold on. So eventually, one of them will knock down an airliner somewhere and will say, golly, how did this happen again? Just the way it did with the original Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. So there's more to the story. I think we'll stop here for the day, but I do recommend taking a look at the article and thinking about what's going on there and keeping that in mind. And, one day when something bad goes down, you'll know how to trace the provenance of the weapons that were used to perpetrate it. Okay, let's see. There's more here, but I think we are very nearly out of time. Well, let's try and cram in a little bit of this one, too, because this seems like something we ought to put on the record. Natasha Bertrand added again for The Atlantic, Russia is attacking the U.S. system from within. Had you heard? A new filing by Special Counsel Robert Mueller shows how Russia uses the federal courts to go after its adversaries. I imagine this is somewhat tied in with the Interpol and the red notices, same kind of play here, but let's take a look. A new court filing submitted on Wednesday of last week by Special Counsel Robert Mueller revealed that a Russian troll farm, currently locked in a legal battle over its alleged interference in the 2016 election, appeared to wage yet another disinformation campaign late last year, this time targeting Mueller himself. This is the one about Concord Management and Consulting and the altered discovery documents. That's the setup here. The tactic, I'll continue down here, didn't seem to convince anyone, but it appeared to mark yet another example of Russia's exploiting the U.S. justice system to undercut its rivals abroad. Last year, Natasha says, I detailed how Russia has figured out how to use the U.S. immigration courts and the so-called red notices, yeah, there they are, issued by Interpol to harass and even detain its enemies. But it doesn't end there. Experts say Kremlin proxies have targeted their rivals and other disfavored individuals by exploiting U.S. courts to pursue bogus claims via superficially legitimate lawsuits. Anders Aslund, a resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, said in a recent report, he worked as an economic advisor to the Russian government from 1991 to 1994. The good days, right? We're supposed to believe that. If you talk to American oligarchs, the Kremlin proxies have done so not only to perpetuate global harassment campaigns against their perceived enemies, Aslund argued, but also to enrich themselves through bad faith claims made possible by the Russian state's abuse of disfavored individuals and their businesses. When Mueller indicted Concord in February of 2018, along with 2 other corporate entities and 13 Russian nationals allegedly connected to the Internet Research Agency, it seemed highly unlikely that the indictment would result in a trial because Russians can't be extradited to the United States. But Concord unexpectedly hired the well-connected American law firm Reed Smith to fight Mueller, arguing that the charges should be dropped because the special counsel was illegally appointed. Bogus argument, but okay. The judge in that case, Dabney Friedrich, has twice refused to dismiss the case and recently lambasted Concord's American lawyers for submitting unprofessional, inappropriate, and ineffective court filings, and the legal battle has raged on. But that's all you get. Don't do that. It's unprofessional and inappropriate. You can be fined. You can be sanctioned. Will it happen? We never know. Now, according to the Mueller filing last week, unidentified actors working out of Russia appear to have weaponized the U.S. discovery process to Concord's benefit. More than 1,000 files on the website that hosted the leaked documents matched those produced in discovery. We know that part of the story. In a statement issued on Thursday, Reed Smith denied responsibility for the breach, claiming the data at issue were hosted by a third-party vendor working for Concord and were never stored on Reed Smith's internal computer systems. In October, legal and national security experts expressed concerns to ABC News that in the Concord case specifically, the Russian government may be trying to use the discovery process in a gray mail strategy designed to make Mueller drop the case in order to prevent sensitive U.S. national security information from being made public. Mark Zaid, an attorney based in Washington, D.C., who focuses on national security law, said he viewed the latest incident involving Concord and the hoax website as part of a consistent strategy by the Russians to hinder, obstruct, and derail Mueller's probe. One wonders whether pursuing the criminal charges against the Russians was worth the difficulty and these current problems, particularly given the odds of ever gaining custody of any individual, that all becoming extremely unlikely. All right, do stay tuned for Justice Putnam's view coming up next, and I'll tell you what he's got in store.
On netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, ready for what's next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Trump's withdrawal from the INF nuke treaty is already having real consequences. GOP Congressman Lee Zeldin randomly lashes out at Nancy Pelosi after a Jewish website accuses him of supporting Nazis. That sounds pretty wacky and wild. Stay tuned for that and much more next.